Today I'm going to talk a little bit about painting with gouache, what they call gouache or body colour, and also line and wash. So a couple of different variations on traditional watercolour. Okay, so I've brought a few examples in. So these are just ordinary watercolour. So this is stuff done in the last week or so. So that's an example of that. This is the closest, probably the closest I've got to line and wash. And this is particularly my take on line and wash. So that would be that. And then gouache is really watercolour, but using opaque colour. So using white mixed in. So this one and this one here and a couple of others are what I call more gouache. So I'll just talk about them in turn and the advantages and disadvantages. So really traditional line and wash is really literally cutting down some lines, letting those dry, and then putting some watercolour over the top of that. I tend to use pens rather than watercolours for mine, but what you could do is something like this. There's different kind of pens you could use. I've not brought in dipper pens, but some people use dipper pens and liquid ink, which is nice. I do find it tends to go everywhere. It's a bit of a messy business. Dipper pens, you get splashes and points everywhere. So I'll occasionally try that. The cleaner and easier pens to use are, well, this is the one I use. I use like a fine liner pen. There's some on the windowsill there if anybody wants to try it. So this is, it's waterproof and it's fade proof and it's called pigment ink. So the idea is I'll pop that line down like that, and as I've done up here, as soon as that is dry, I could put something over the top of that and that line will stay put. So I'll just add a little bit of watercolour just to demonstrate that. So that they will stay there. So that's like what they call a waterproof. So once the ink's dry, it won't rehydrate. Some people like to use just like these ordinary roller ball pens, and these are not waterproof. These are water soluble, I believe. So if I was going to do something like, I know a few people that actually prefer to use these, and then they let all the colours just bleed in together. So that might be quite nice. Something you might want to experiment with. Let's see if that's going to work. Just trying a bit there, but you can just kind of do that sort of thing and soften out the lines if you want. You can literally kind of turn the pen into a wash itself. So I guess that would be a really quick way of just popping down a wash if you wanted to. Just use the ink from a fine liner. So that's another option. I know some people that use, these are like a permanent marker. So I know one or two people that use these permanent markers to draw with and then put a wash over the top of that. So that's a thick mark, and you can also do a thinner mark. These will be waterproof. What you'll find though is it will come through to the other side. So if you want to use a permanent marker, you need a bit of something. If you're using a sketchbook, for instance, you need something behind it, otherwise it'll go through to the page underneath. So that's that, and so that should, that'll stay put once it's down. So that's another option. We've got pens. As I say, these kind of sketches. So something like this one, I use fine liner pens and these pens called Tombows, which I think I've mentioned this before. This is the same sort of thing, but I've used a little bit of grey pastel or a little bit of white pastel as highlights. So on a brown paper. So I've got quite a few of these brown paper sketchbooks, which I quite like. And also with the gouache, they're on the brown paper. So what I'll do is just do something very quick here. I just use sketchbook paper, so it could be like these bits here. I tend to get the lines in first. Just something like that, and then it's a very nice, quick way of just popping some tone in. So I might want a lighter tone there, and just very quickly block that in. I think that one's starting to run out a bit actually. These are, they're a brush pen. You can get them online. They're probably about £3.50, £4 each, so they're not particularly cheap. But I find these are, for me, my favourite kind of sketching medium. And if I wanted a slightly darker tone, I would use that. Some little windows in there. And then I've also got this one, this very dark grey, which to my mind is virtually black, really. Gives me a very dark mark. So with those, I find those a really good, quick, instant kind of sketching medium to use. Much quicker than pencil. It doesn't smudge like pencils would. It's not going to smudge in my sketchbook. I can, pop in an area of tone quite quickly, particularly if it wasn't running out. Whereas a pencil, that took me quite a while to sort of fill that in with pencil. So yeah, they've been my favourite kind of sketching medium for quite a number of years now. So that's the kind of line wash. I just started sketching this one out, and with these sort of subjects, I think it lends itself to architectural subjects. I quite often start with little details, like I started with that window, and then I went on to that window, and then had a look at how much space between them, did that one, and I started drawing the roof in, and then, so quite often I'll start with a little detail, tiny little thing, just let the whole drawing expand. So it's a bit like I'm sort of visually scanning it, but not from any particular direction. I'll go up and down and left to right. But I start somewhere and just carry on that little journey across. It's like a little visual journey. Whatever I see, I'll start sketching. So there's like a few trees there. You can go in like that. And then perhaps a little bit more the roof, a bit more this roof. Then just here there's a window out there, so pop that one in. I'm not sure where to end this, but if I get the windows and the spacing between the windows, that helps me to determine the overall length of the building. That comes to about there, I think. So I'll carry that onto there, bring that down there, and up. So that's kind of how I go about the drawing side of it. And I'd say with colour, sometimes just a splash of something is enough just to liven it up. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to worry about, whereas with watercolour we're trying to get lovely washes and get the whole thing to work with watercolour. This is a different sort of thing, so you can treat it quite, sometimes just a little bit of, sometimes people just put a little bit of random colour here and there, and that's kind of enough to just liven the whole thing up a bit. I mean personally, I quite like the greys with this sort of thing. Some people are really into the colour and the lines. My own taste is I like this and I like pure watercolour. So I've occasionally done this, but I tend to, if I use colour, I tend to like to lose the lines a little bit if I can. But it can be quite effective, and many artists use this as a sketching method, or just. So that's that. All good so far? Mm-hmm. Yep. If you want to try this, there's plenty of fine liner pens on the windowsill there, and the Tombow pens are here if you want to try these out. Okay, so that's that. The other thing I thought I'd talk about is gouache. So I'll just do the similar sort of thing. So something a little bit similar to one of these. I quite often work on tone paper. Although you don't need to. I just quite like the look of it on the tone paper. Probably should try one on white. I've not really done that so much. And often I will just go straight in with the paint. So rather than putting pencil lines or any other lines, I just draw the paint. This is a little bit. It's more forgiving than traditional watercolour. So picture I do use a flat one. That'll do. So it might be that I try and just sort of draw with the brush as I go. Like that. Go for a dark. put the window in the wrong place, but hopefully it'll go out there like that. So it's actually quite nice. So some people find that they are very nervous about drawing with brushes if you're starting pencil. So this is quite a nice exercise, just on bits of scraps of old paper, a bit of watercolouring, and whether we come out with a good result or not, it gives you a lot of practice just handling brushes and controlling colour and tone as well as edges. Where one thing starts, you see that very quickly has started to come together. So the other roof will be there. So effectively it's watercolour, but then I can then add some white. So if I wanted to add a white, so this is gouache white, so it's a nice, very opaque, strong white. They're quite expensive, these, but they give you a nice, strong colour. I mean, you could possibly just use a bit of white acrylic as well. If you've got white acrylic, that would work too. And make that a little bit more blue. So I can pop that in, to where I want. That's actually a bit too bright. Just dull that a tiny bit. But I can mix this in with the colours so that I'm getting. I guess so it's a little bit similar to oils, but the advantage of this is it's going to dry very quickly. So put some colour down, that'll dry, and then I can then work on the top. The other thing I can do, which I couldn't do with acrylics, is I can lift it out to an extent. So if I wanted to wash a bit out or soften an edge out, I can go back into that and just soften that, blot that out a little bit. Let's get a bit of tissue or something. I'll just use my fingers. You can move it around a little bit. So I mean, gouache is a medium I've actually used really since I was quite young. I think I came across it when I was about 13. My first set of paints were oils, and I got given some oils when I was about 10. But then I came across this book in the library, in South End Library, once when I was 13, and they just seemed like quite a good medium. And then I found, particularly when I was starting out, they're a lot more controllable for me than oils. But I've never really heard of watercolours and traditional watercolour washes and all that sort of thing. So for me, it was just instinctive, just playing around with it, seeing what I could do. So I think a really nice medium, particularly sketching, as I say, particularly like I'm on the slightly toned paper, because it immediately starts to pop out. And then if I wanted a little bit of sky behind there, let's mix that in with a little bit of blue. Just like that, a tiny bit. And so this isn't watercolour paper, it's just ordinary, very cheap paper, sketchbook paper, but it's a nice way of doing very quick colour sketches. All good? Yeah.